Good evening, colleagues and members of the public watching at home. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee on Monday, the 8th of July. Begin with the usual housekeeping messages. There is no fire alarm planned. If any members or public speakers need to use the facilities, they're just behind me here. I'll look to take a break about 7 o'clock. Depending on how we're doing and how we're getting through the agenda. That may not prove necessary, but just to set expectations so that we're not too uncomfortable. I've received 2 apologies for this evening's meeting from Councillor Nelson, who is subbed by Councillor Rose. Welcome, Councillor Rose. And from Councillor Widdowson, who's subbed by Councillor Orrell. Welcome, Councillor Orrell. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest before we begin? No? Thank you. The next agenda item is minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June. Can I ask if there are any matters of accuracy in the minutes? Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure we asked during the discussion we're having on the pipelines if they could put the monetary value. That's not picked up in the minutes, and it's not picked up in the minutes.
Okay, I know the minutes tend not to be a verbatim record of the meeting, but it's maybe something we can pick up when we come to look at the pipeline. If officers can pick up that suggestion. It may be something that's not for this iteration of the pipeline, but it may be coming later, but we can pick that up. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes, or can I ask members if they're happy to approve them as an accurate record? Yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 3, public participation. We have one registered speaker at today's meeting, who is Gwen Swinburne. Welcome, Gwen. So I'm sure you know, have 3 minutes to address the committee, and please start in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the corporate improvement plan, some concerns, detail I'm afraid. As so much of this is concerned with our Code of Corporate Governance, this and the draft of the next LGA progress report should be referred to the Specialist Audit and Governance Committee. Secondly, with no organogram structure, terms of reference with multiple new boards on top of the opaque boards already in existence, such as CRAG, it is impossible to see how they all fit together. Let A&G review these and the terms of reference and membership of these various boards, as well as those meeting recording protocols, please. It seems almost everything appears to be gatekept by the Chief Operating Officer and the same discrete group of his departmental direct reports, the Directors of Housing and Communities and Governance, and indeed all other directors, most of whom bring recent experience from other authorities, are excluded from the Corporate Improvement Board. This appears a very narrow group indeed, too narrow. May I ask that the Managing Customer Relations Policy draft be consulted with us customers before being adopted? Likewise, the budget setting engagement strategy that appears to have been agreed last April, which I don't believe has been considered by A&G either. The elephant in the room has been brushed under the carpet again. There is no respect for transparency or the law, whilst the forward plan is so utterly inadequate, whilst key decisions are regularly made contrary to the law and are not recorded according to the law. The author did not link any of the following background papers: Working as One City programme, the now refreshed internal governance structure, a schedule of our city leaders, what is the City Development Group, the TORs and membership of the Corporate Governance Board, the Core Service Performance Board, how they all fit in with the established boards. It's impossible to navigate. Finally, Chair, the essential foundations of a functional democracy are transparent and informative forward plans, legal key and other decision-making, legal officer decision recording, a functional, not cut and paste, annual governance statement, and a known and understood code of corporate governance. Accordingly, please can you add these as a scrutiny item to your committee, because despite raising it multiple times with audit and governance to no avail, that committee is overseen by the very director responsible for all those matters. An aberration that needs fixing. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'll send it round because it's a nightmare.
Thank you, and I'm sure members will wish to pick up some of those comments in the discussion on the next items. Thank you. Which brings us on to agenda item 4, which is the Corporate Improvement Action Plan. So we're joined for this item by Councillor Douglas as leader and portfolio holder, and by officers. If you'd like to join us at the table, please. So this item's coming to this committee as a pre-decision scrutiny item. There's an executive member decision session on the 17th of July, as I understand it, where the action plan will be agreed. So this is scrutiny's opportunity to comment on the draft action plan and to make any suggestions or recommendations we wish to make that can be taken into consideration when the decision is made at the forthcoming decision session. So if I can ask officers to introduce themselves, please, and give us an introduction to the draft action plan, which you can take as read, but if you can give us a brief overview, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Claire Folt, Assistant Director of Policy and Strategy. So we're bringing today the Corporate Improvement Action Plan in Annex A. This, I'm going to have to my glasses, apologies. This follows the Local Government Association Peer Challenge in February and their 15 recommendations, which then subsequently informed the Corporate Improvement Framework. Over the summer, we invited residents to tell us what they think about the Corporate Improvement Framework and held workshops with officers, trade unions and partners. Feedback from residents is in Annex C. All this has been brought together in a set of detailed actions aligned to the 4 themes of the Corporate Improvement Framework: strengthening strategic leadership, One City, One Council, harnesses the commitment of the city to deliver our ambitions, and then build a strong foundation. The colour coding represents actions underway, and you'll see the key in Annex A, and we will be reporting on progress against the action plan through the newly established Corporate Improvement Board, to the LGA in December, and then to Executive next May. The action plan is live in that it will be informed by staff surveys, future inspections, and the Staff Ideas Hub, together with resident feedback as part of our continuous journey of improvement. Following a scrutiny's review this evening, we'll take any recommendations to the leader at decision session in mid-July for her consideration, and we'll update you later about resident feedback if you wish us to. Do you want me to pick up on some of the public points?
Yes, please.
Yep. So the newly established board, the action plan is a list of the actions rather than the detail behind it. The newly established internal governance boards will be with A&G as part of the Code of Governance update in September. I take on board the Corporate Improvement Board is too narrow membership, and I'll look at that and take that back. Budget setting roadmap, the budget setting strategy is coming to Executive in September. Which will include the steps we're going to for discussion there, and you might wish to have it prior to then. And there we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add anything, Helen?
Yes, sorry, Helen Whiting, Chief Officer, HR and Support Services. I've largely said I will support Claire in this item in case there's any HR or any workforce issues that come up, because as you will see from the action plan, there's a number of aspects that link in with the workforce, and they've been translated to the draft workforce strategy, which I know that you were interested in, but we can bring at a later date to this committee.
Thank you. Yes, I think there are a number of future scrutiny, budget setting, and other items that are already on our radar, linked to this, but they'd be subject to separate and more detailed discussions. I think if we can keep focus this evening on, the detail of what we're looking at here, rather than delving too deep into things we will be discussing in more detail at future meetings. So how I propose to structure the discussion is looking at page 15 of the report pack, which is the draft action plan, beginning with objective 1, strengthen strategic leadership, is go through the 4 objectives in turn rather than jump around between objectives. Obviously, looking at the table, we've got the action, we've got the detail, we've got the accountable officer, and then we've got the deadline. For those members who are looking at a black and white copy, I'm not sure how easy it is to differentiate between the greens and the yellows in terms of the date, but I'm sure we can navigate our way through that as best we can. So if we begin with objective 1, strengthen strategic leadership, and invite comments, observations, suggestions from members as we work our way through. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, it's just on your point around colouring, for those who don't have it in front of them, the lighter one is the amber, the darker one is the green, and there are no reds in there. So it can be discerned if you know that pattern.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check one thing as well on the same point, which is we've got a lot of whites that are that are ongoing, and we've got a lot of whites that are June and July 2024. I assume this is just an older version of the document, not a live current latest deadline and status on it.
So can you use your microphone, please?
Apologies. Yes, obviously June, July, we're just finishing things off at the moment, but largely those are in track.
Yeah, just because they say not started on the colour coding rather than overdue or anything else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Who'd like to kick us off with some comments? Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this work plan. Just on page 15, action 2, detail 3, regarding the half-day shadowing. Really interesting idea. Glad to see that it's been included. I just wanted to know, is there any specific sort of strategic synergies that we could look at in terms of which teams would best be shadowing, or is it more sort of a process for example, someone at one part of the council to look at somewhere completely different, or is there going to be more sort of alignment discussed, or is that still to be sketched out?
The shadowing is large.
Half day, yes.
Yeah, the half day. What we're looking for is to learn more about different processes. It's for officers to actually look at this and decide. So we're in the early, hence why it's October. We're working with our Leading Together group, which is our senior heads of service, to introduce that. And we also want to say, is this a good idea? They've said it is, but we very much want to co-produce how that actually goes forward. So they'll very much be at the centre of how they want that to go forward as well, because that's the best way it will work.
Yeah.
And just in terms of the staff that will be sort of taking part in that, or the areas of taking part, is that mostly sort of the senior levels to look at, or could it be, is the scope quite broad?
Certainly not. I think it should be wider down the organisation as well. It's based on need, because we don't want to just see it to be senior managers. It needs to be right down the organisation. And to be honest, that already happens across the board. So it's not as though this isn't happening already, whether it be from something about somebody starting on a new project. We can say, well, go off and speak to that officer, go and see how they've done it on different projects. So it's live. So this is very much more building on this more than anything else. And also, I won't say give them the permission, but it's actually saying, yes, go off and do that. That is a way of doing training, etc., and looking at different things in different ways. So it's just reinforcing.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask a question on page 16, action 3, detail 2, launch and managing customer relations policy. I just wondered if is it launch or develop? Is it something that already exists that is being rolled out, or is it something that's being developed? So it's not something I've come across before.
It's in development, so it hasn't been finished yet, but it's in development.
So it's launched the development of okay. No, otherwise it seems, oh, well, you know, where is this policy? How has it come about? And in terms of the, from a resident's perspective, because it indicates that this policy will help residents understand their roles and responsibilities. How would you kind of sense check that with residents? Would it be through the talk about panel or some other means to ensure that it had kind of landed?
Yeah, we're obviously consulting the trade unions from a staff perspective. So I suspect we'll go to the talk about panel because it's quite a large policy at the moment. So we need to think about how we get some meaningful feedback associated to it. So yeah, can we take that away and come back to you on a later date to sort of consider how we do meaningful engagement with residents?
Yeah, I appreciate there'll be sub actions underneath this action, but I just wanted to explore what that meant. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just next one down. So section 3, subsection 3, and it's just around the trauma-informed approach, and just understanding what you understand really by that. There's a really brilliant document which I brought along. I can't give it to you because it's my partner's, but I just wanted to make sure we're aware of it. It's Humber, North Yorkshire, and they've published a framework for how, as an organisation, you reach trauma-informed. And the way that this reads, and it may just be semantics, it reads as if we're going to watch some videos and then we'll all be trauma-informed, and that'll be great.
No.
And it's just to be clear that it's such a deeply embedded process that needs to go on, and it needs to happen at every level of an organisation. And there also seems to be a kind of an emphasis that it's about the officers supporting residents. That's a huge part of it, but actually the officers supporting the other officers is also a huge part of it. So I just wanted to make sure that if there's an opportunity to maybe just tighten that wording up, just to be really clear about it being about the organisation going on a journey to become trauma-informed, not that we're all going to suddenly adopt a trauma-informed practice and that's the end of it. And as I say, this document, having been produced locally, is really good as a starting framework.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, I do appreciate that. We have done some training already with a number of members of staff, and the Children's Services Department have got this completely covered. So it's been nice that we've actually been able to use that model and how they've used that. It's not going to be relevant for absolutely every member of staff all at the same level. And that's why we've been lucky to have a number of different videos, which is where the videos come in. But we still need to be able to assess all of that. But it was all about launching trauma-informed and making awareness. And it isn't a case of a sheep dip approach, which I never like about training. It is about that continual kind of conversation and keeping that going as well.
And just to reassure Councillor Crawshaw, we're drawing on the same framework because it's being led by, initially by, I'm going to get the wrong term, our head of youth offending services, who has just recruited a trauma-informed practitioner who has been obviously trained professionally, but also working very closely with the Yorkshire and Humber network. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just to sort of really hammer home the point, I do appreciate what you're saying about it will be potentially more relevant or more directly sort of part of everyday practice for certain areas and certain departments. But I think the point of an organisation becoming trauma-informed is that actually it matters to everybody in the same way that corporate parenting matters to all of us. And particularly things like, say, for example, housing management officers or the customer service officers, those sort of people who may receive quite difficult interactions, and actually having a trauma-informed approach to managing those interactions will, I think, give a better outcome for everybody in the long term. So it's just, as long as we're clear that it's all the way through the organisation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, it was supplementary to your earlier question on 3.2.
Yeah.
If in effect this is the stage where it's launching the development of this policy, what's the likely timescale, and when's it likely to come back, and who to?
So this is the managing customer relations policy. Timescales for that.
I mean, we're starting the development, so I haven't got all these answers to hand. I
Okay.
mean, I wonder if you wanted to invite us back so that we could bring something together and present back to you.
Yeah. That would be fine. Thank you for that. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. My point was around objective 2.1, and just to ask if there were any examples around celebrations of success that you wanted to highlight in this committee. I'm just kind of very aware of the pressures that staff would have been under in terms of budget pressures and changes that have been made over recent years, and just how it's great to see it there, and it is incredibly important that we show all our council staff the appreciation, both I guess from us as elected members, but also just generally. And I just thought if there were any examples that you'd already come across of times when that was already happening, it would be nice to be able to pass on those thanks from this environment. And then just separately, apologies for being a few minutes late. I missed the declaration of interest phase. So just relating to point 4 of that objective to just to declare that I have literally had my first day as the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime today. That was why I was a few minutes late, but I just thought I should also declare it as an interest because it's referenced in the document. But thank you.
Thank you. So we haven't moved on to objective 2 yet, but I'll let you answer that question anyway. Who wants to pick that one up about celebrating?
So the Chief Operating Officer took some time out of his diary to spend quite a bit of time with Highways team recently around Queensbridge, obviously Queen Street Bridge, and the fact that the walls didn't fall down. So that incredible feat of engineering, frankly, that they went through and that so many other people supported them with. So they've done something around that to celebrate success. And we're not talking about spending a lot of money with a big do and everybody getting dressed up and all that sort of celebration. It's literally giving officers the opportunity to share their story and their experience and to be validated, really.
Thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to objective 1, looking at the section 4 midterm financial strategy, just trying to marry this chart with what Claire Powell said at the beginning in terms of the budget setting process, which I think you said they would be coming to executive in September. Just really to understand in terms of design the budget setting process that provides opportunities for consultation, it's understanding the recognition of what consultation didn't happen the last time that will be included this time. And also in terms of the point below, the savings targets for the next 3 years, how that will be communicated, because that's November 2024. So it's understanding those two.
So the Director of Finance is preparing a report for executive that will come to you in September, which sets out the process to develop the midterm financial strategy. In the meantime, we're launching, which will be informed by a comprehensive resident engagement we're running through the summer. So that's launching, I'm going to say next week, next Monday, which will include workshops with residents, workshops with community groups, workshops with partners that are being held through end of July, August, an online consultation and an offline consultation, which will include postcards and polls, just really to give a real broad sense of what residents which services residents prioritise and what's most important to them, to help inform the next stage, which will be talked about in September, which is more around kind of honing down all of that information and feedback to understand what the budget proposals will be for further consultation with residents, partners and businesses throughout November. So it's a kind of 2-stage process.
Okay, thank you. I'll just a supplementary. I was going to ask about action 4 detail 1 in terms of budget setting process. It's helpful to understand what that will consist of. Just to say, if there's a way of involving scrutiny at some point in terms of maybe once the public facing consultation has happened in terms of reviewing the feedback from that, but prior to the later phases of budget decision, it's something that we've kind of spoken about in at various scrutiny committees. But if that can be borne in mind as at what point would it make sense to bring some of that feedback to scrutiny from sort of member input? Yeah.
Would it be possible to come back in September? I'm saying September, I think like early mid-September. Would that work?
Come back with what? So
Resident feedback. So we'll be able to provide the first, the first tranche of resident feedback is being collated throughout, well, from the 15th of July to the 1st or 2nd of September. So then there's a little bit of time to obviously go through it and analyse it. And then we can bring it to you and say, this is what residents and business have said. What's your thoughts?
I think the issue we have with September is that our meeting's on the 9th, which doesn't give a lot of time. So, but I'm sure we can discuss that offline as to how that might work. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. When reading this first section, there's something that occurred to me, but it kind of applies to the whole document. Is that all right to bring it up now?
Yeah.
The final column, most of the actions have deadlines or kind of expected completion dates, and some things say ongoing. But I spotted a few things which I wondered whether maybe they should be ongoing or having an ongoing element to them, which isn't reflected in the document. So how are we going to ensure that that sort of thing is ongoing if it's not in this document? So Councillor Crawshaw raised the example of like the trauma-informed, making sure we have trauma-informed practice and that sort of thing. That's got a completion date, whereas actually ensuring that ongoing training happens and that training is reviewed and that it is that we do actually have trauma-informed practice implemented forever is more of an ongoing issue. So how will you ensure that it is ongoing if it's not in this?
That's a really good point, and we'll mark that one particularly up as ongoing, so that it's all put in place and ready to share across the workforce by April 2025 and all the different levels of it. But making sure it happens, we'll make sure that's ongoing.
Good, thank you. Helen?
Can I just come in on that, Councillor Melly? Obviously, there's an elements of this that are actually put within the workforce strategy as well, action plan. So it would be picked up accordingly there. So this is kind of in response to the initial, but there's elements of my action plan that takes forward in terms of my service plan and the workforce development plan that has this on as well. So it's mirrored within there for the workforce specifically. So just to give you some assurance around that.
Great, thank you. Is that a supplementary, Councillor Crawshaw? Okay, I'll add you to the list. Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Chair. On section 1 again, midterm financial strategy, point 2, share the revised MTS with the residents, members, etc. At the moment, the medium-term financial strategy is very clear on the cost pressures that go up to make the savings target of 10 million. It's not at all clear on areas that may provide that money. So that's an observation. Second observation, last year it was a 4-term medium-term financial strategy. This year it's a 3-term medium-term financial strategy. Are we counting down to the next local government elections, or is it going to be a set period of time?
So we were going for 3-year medium-term financial strategy because we're hoping for a 3-year settlement. Obviously, it'll be updated and reflected according to what we hear from the new administration, but it's only a week in, so we haven't got that clarity just yet.
Okay. Can I just ask one more?
If you take your papers off the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. Second point 4, design short financial literacy courses for senior managers to learn how to manage a budget, setting out the key dates for each year. When a manager becomes a senior manager, do they have like a sort of training program to upskill them to the skills they need to perform that role? It's just that I'm quite concerned that we have senior managers who can't manage a budget, as that would seem like almost a prerequisite of them A, getting the job, and B, keeping the job.
I think it's maybe the language that we maybe need to design on that. Is there a training course for every manager moving from manager to senior manager? No, there isn't. We would expect, but if there isn't, when you come into York as a council, you are shown how we manage the budget. You can manage a budget, but you're shown the financial processes, and that's what that's about, our financial systems, etc., of how you can do it. And I think that was a commentary that we didn't have, that we had from our senior managers, to say, when you come into the organisation, it's really useful to have a bit more detail rather than just manuals of how to use our financial management system, rather than managing the process, managing a budget. As you rightly say, if you're required to manage a budget, experience of managing a budget is there. It's
Okay.
vested.
Do you want to tidy up that wording then? 'Cause
Yes, that's, yeah.
not how it comes across at all.
Okay. So supplementary.
That was quite an interesting answer to that one. What concerns me then is if we've got senior managers coming to the organisation who have been able to demonstrate decades of financial management, and they're basically saying, I can't figure out your system. There's lots of conversations about the York way. What is the chance of that feedback to come the other way? And then to actually be able to say, you know what, I've watched your video training, I've seen how you do it, and it's wrong. We've been able to control our budget for the last 20 years at this local authority because we do it this way, perhaps. How will that feed in and allow people to be able to say, you know what, you need to change your ways of managing budgets because it's not the right. I'm not saying it isn't the right way. It might, sometimes it may be, sometimes it may not be. It needs to be something that goes both ways.
Yeah.
So this is the 12-month action plan, and this is a live action plan. And if we hear that feedback from our managers, then that is something we'll obviously have to reflect on. So we've got to start somewhere. And the starting place is, do you understand how the York way, if you like, the way we set up our systems, the way our systems work, the way you draw down purchase orders, environments, and all those exciting things through our system. But then if that isn't actually, if it's too complicated or it's too difficult, or actually somebody's got a better way of doing it, then we're all ears. And that's where this action plan being live and then going through the corporate improvement board to keep it live and current would be really helpful. We won't lose that insight. We'll be able to do something with it.
Thank you. Got a couple more people to bring in on this section. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Healy has made the point that I was going to make with regards to point number 4. Just to kind of build on that, really. So they've all got dates that are somewhere in the future or have passed. This one's got a date of August, which is next month, and it's not even kind of ongoing. So I'm just curious as to where are we with that? I mean, is there something already in place? Is there something already embedded? Are we trying to enhance something we've already got, or just that was?
Yes, it's very much enhancing what we've already got. So we've got an officer working on it at this point in time. And going back on what Councillor Healy said, yes, oh, sorry, Councillor Eyre said, it is about testing it. So we can send out and say, how do you find this? You made a comment, how are you finding this? So it can be ongoing as well.
So that needs to be yellow then.
Yeah,
thank
keep
you.
it ongoing.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you. Mine was sort of supplementary to these as well. And it was sort of on 3 and 4 really. And again, part of it may just be about wording, because I wasn't sure about the distinction in 3 where we're talking about heads of service, and then in 4 where we're talking about senior managers, and whether or not this sort of literacy courses for senior managers. I'd sort of read it as being that it was at a kind of head of service level, because I think a bit like Councillor Eyre had sort of assumed that the very senior managers would be financially literate, which I think everybody would assume would be the case. So again, it was just to clarify the wording on that. And then just to make the point really that I think it's really positive in point 3 to be talking about heads of service being brought in and meaningfully engaged in the budget setting process, because I think historically that hasn't always been the case. And certainly there are some areas where actually that kind of, you know, on the ground knowledge about how the budget is operating on a day-to-day basis, there's savings to be had, or there's potentially overruns that you can cite months and months beforehand if you've got that bit of knowledge there. So yeah, just the clarity on 4, but just wanted to make that point of how positive it is on 3.
Yeah, Helen.
Just the interchangeable of heads of service and senior managers. I think we just need some consistency, so we'll pick that up, because it's not just heads of service, it's senior managers as well. So
okay, thank you, members. So that concludes objective 1. So we now move on to objective 2, one city, one council, which begins on page 17. So I'll start with one question, if I may. Just action 1, detail 2, refresh internal governance arrangements. Can you explain in a bit more detail what specifically you mean by internal governance arrangements? Is it, I read it and it crops up throughout the rest of the report in terms of processes through which a report to a decision session or an executive meeting would be signed off, or those kind of processes. Is my understanding correct? Is it more than that? Is it less than that? It'd just be helpful to understand the breadth of that description, really.
Yeah, I mean, very happy to bring this back to this group as well. And it's going to A&G in September. So internal governance arrangements exist. They've always existed. Obviously, we've got a code of corporate governance. But what we found is it wasn't always very clear where they fed into and how they interacted with CMT. And there were a couple of really important boards that were missing. So what we've done is we've mapped out how and which internal governance boards feed into corporate management team, so that there's real oversight to where, for example, corporate equalities group sits and how that feeds into CMT, where a climate change and natural capital programme board that delivers the programme around climate change strategy, where that fits and how that feeds into the corporate management team. Now, those two boards have already existed. They've always existed. Have existed for a long time, but making sure it's really clear line of sight so that there's agenda items in CMT that pick up, for example, feedback from the Climate Change Programme Board or the Corporate Equalities Group. But then we've introduced, I'm going to say 4. One, which is about oversight of the local plan, regeneration and housing delivery programme. So much more oversight in terms of bringing those 3 massive major capital programmes together. With the Chief Operating Officer on that board chairing it for oversight. One which is about corporate improvement, which includes this action plan, and it will include the Working as One City programme once we've shaped and scoped that, which is coming to executive in September, which is around how we become a more efficient and effective organisation, drawing on the feedback from officers, which picks up on your point earlier, Councillor Cawshaw. And then the final additional programme board is, we're calling it the Core Services Performance Board, which basically is day-to-day transactional delivery. How can we make sure that we continually to improve resident experience around our day-to-day interactions, so our transactions, so things like housing repairs, customer services, waste collection, all those sorts of things. I mean, we call it, like I sort of think of it as turning reds to greens. So where you've got maybe a service that isn't performing as well as it can, what can a head of service do? What kind of opportunities can we provide across the council so that they can make sure that the things that maybe aren't doing as well as they could be are actually focused on, and the red turns to green. Does that make sense?
And so presumably the corporate document in which those arrangements are described will be updated as the new boards come into effect, and presumably will include some form of diagrammatical representation.
Yeah,
that'd be good. Members, Councillor Merritt.
Sorry, just a supplementary. You said 3 and then you said 4 boards, but you listed 3.
Corporate Governance Board. So Corporate Governance Board is the final board which looks at all of the implications. So at the back of your reports, your decision reports, you may remember there's a list of implications and list of implication officers. So for example, I'm going to get them all wrong now, but finance, HR, legal, have you got one to hand? Qualities, communication, those DPAI, all those sorts of things. And the Corporate Governance Board looks at those implications. First of all, make sure we've got the resources and the funding and the legality, statutory responsibility in place to allow the decision to go ahead, so that when it goes to executive for decision, it's fully informed, fully impacted. And then secondly, make sure that all of the information is presented in a way that informs the decision in line with the policy.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Supplemental to your question, actually. So You've created 4 new boards. As part of this exercise, which you've now completed, that's going to A&G in September, have you looked across the remit, across all of the boards and said, well, actually, are any of them redundant? You have done that. That's good. The yes is great. And second point is, the member of the public raised several issues around the forward plan, decision notices, etc. Where were those, which I think members have had concerns for probably years now? Where's that getting picked up in this whole, the whole exercise, not necessarily this individual point?
So governance is at the back, and I'm just having a look at it now. Shall we come on to it? Yeah.
Okay. So we're still on objective 2. Any further comments? Councillor Merritt.
Again, it's partly supplemental to your previous. You said there'll be a corporate document that lists all this. Will it actually also, will it give the remits for these different boards, and will it give the memberships? Where will it be? Where will it be available?
So it's not something I'm driving, so I'll have to take this back to Democratic Services and Information Governance, who are taking it to the A&G meeting in September, but I'll make sure it's got all the details that you've just requested.
Yeah, thank you. Another question from me on page 18, action 2, detail 3. Co-design with partners, the top 5 things to focus on. I suppose question, why 5? Why not 7, 3, 6? Yeah. I just wonder whether we're kind of arbitrarily excluding things we might not want to exclude. And reference to including increasing public affairs activities. It seems a bit of an odd phrase. I just wondered if explain what's meant by that.
So 5 came from the partners. So we had 2 workshops. We had a workshop with 2 lots of partners in 2 separate focus groups, and 5 was the number they all agreed on. So I guess it is arbitrary, but it's from the partners rather than ourselves. Public affairs activities is similar to the work we did with Great British Railways and local government reorganisation, where there's a key ambition for the council that requires outside decision making. We work with partners, particularly city leaders, to join us, if you like, in championing whatever that kind of issue is. So local government reorganisation, sorry, not local government, the Great British Railways, we had a whole task and finish group with city partners who wrote off to various different sections of state and published letters in the Yorkshire Post about why York would be a great place for Great British Railways. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that you necessarily win the prize, but it actually is a way of corralling our stakeholders and our partners around a key issue.
Yeah, so it's kind of lobbying for an agreed sort of
Position.
cause.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley, then Councillor Burton.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm afraid I don't have page numbers on this. So it's the same section, but it's in section number 3, building capacity and capability. Again, I'm coming back to a very similar theme to what I had earlier. Point number 2, explore the best way to develop, change and project capabilities to lead transformation, working closely with directorates, taking a one council approach to deliver end benefits, such as improved customer experience and more efficient council. That sounds like wow. And it's August 2024 and there's no update, there's no, according to this, it hasn't even begun yet. That's a wow. I'm just curious because the language is brilliant and the objective is brilliant, but it's going to happen next month, or the deadline's next month.
So it's about the best way to develop that change and project capability rather than actually delivering all the benefits that are listed underneath. So how do we focus our resources around the same benefits rather than going off in different directions? It should be yellow. It has already started that piece of work. Obviously Helen will have a better idea on when we can conclude it. It's a workforce issue. Do you want to say anything?
Yes, it's an ongoing discussion. We've recently just finished the corporate management team restructure. We're going forward with the next stage, which is referenced in this section as well at the objective 1.3 about the CLG review, and we're working our way with corporate management team members at the moment to look at change projects, capabilities, where we can go, looking at transformation, etc. And that's our starting point. We're also working with what we call our leading together team, and they're our senior heads of service. And we've had discussions with them over the last couple of months. So it is very much how we go about things. That's what we've talked about. The actual doing is the next stage, and that's what we're taking forward. So, as it were, it is the best way to develop, and everyone's putting a lot of views about that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thanks. Pretty much supplementary. Same point really, just I guess there'll be a lot of officers who are drowning a little bit, I guess, at the moment, and feeling the pressure as there has been for a long time. Obviously, this is a lot of change that's coming through. We've already seen it at the corporate management level that it's a difficult process for people. And we used to have a lot more staff who worked in change management than we do now, I guess. So are we confident that we've got the right people in place to manage that change process still? Or do we feel that we need to provide more trained heads of services, service level managers to kind of support that process? Is that all being fleshed out as part of that?
That's currently being fleshed out, and that's part of this process as well, because change management isn't just a case of being the heads of service, it's corporate management team, it is the HR team, for instance, and I've looked at the resources within HR. That's one of being the key areas, and it's also corporate members of the corporate leadership group as a whole. So yes, that is all being fleshed out at the minute, and thank you for your acknowledgement. Yes, we are doing the same or more with less. It needs to be practical, and that's what we're looking at. So in some cases we're doing investor save in terms of where we've got some of those key resources. It might not necessarily be in a change manager at this point in time, but it's almost like a bit of a skills audit, and that's some work that we're doing. I met an individual officer today that's just gone through a project management apprenticeship and said, I'm hungry and keen. By goodness, her name is on my list. So yes, it is about drafting people in, and it might not necessarily be a permanent role. It'd be a case of, we've got a project for you. Well, we need your resources for the next 3 months. So it'd be seconding and making sure we've got the right staff in the right areas with the right skills, and also the ambition and enthusiasm. It's also taking that in board in terms of succession planning as well, because we've got a lot of people out there with different talents as well that we can draw in. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Helen's point, doing the same or more with less. You do seem to have a lot more boards, and therefore it's important to understand who is overseeing that this is going to deliver the outcomes that we need, residents need, and is actually a useful application of time when you have so few staff. Who is actually making sure that these boards, and really the more public that decision making can be, the better.
So if you take the City Development Board, that already existed in 2 or 3 different formats, as the Major Capital Programme Board, the Local Plan Group, I don't know what it's called, I'm afraid, the Transport Steering Board, all sorts of different ways of spending money on large infrastructure, housing delivery programme, and they've been brought together in one. So, for example, they've consolidated a number of different programme boards into one programme board. In terms of, which obviously reduces the time, in terms of oversight, it's the Chief Operating Officer. So he is the chair on a large number of them. And obviously it's subject to review. And I guess if Ian Floyd's not happy that it's delivering, then he'll let us know and we'll need to refresh it again.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Quick supplemental on Councillor Waller's point. Will you be, for all of these boards, are they going to publish the agenda, then publish the minutes? Because I believe that's A, required by law, and B, is something that regularly happens consistently.
They're internal governance boards, so typically they're subject to FOIs, and I guess if we get lots of FOIs about the same thing, we'll just publish them because it's quicker. But they are not yet subject to external Scrutiny because it's how officers deliver the requirements of executive. So executive make a decision, and then this is about how do officers work together to make sure that decision is exercised, if you like, within the terms set out by executive where the public decision is made.
Thank you. Shall we move on to objective 3, which is harness the commitment to the city to deliver ambitions? Who has any comments on this? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just under section 1, subsection 4, and it was just a really brief point around senior management writing weekly blogs, which I think can be really helpful as long as it's not really time consuming, both for the person writing it, but also for the people reading it. So as long as the intention is, you know, short snapshots on a frequent basis. And if it's possible for members to receive that, because I know that there's some internal communication and actually members don't always receive it, and that sort of knowledge of what's going on could be potentially really helpful for us all.
Thank you. Helen, do you want to respond?
You've hit that quite rightly as well, because obviously we want this to go out to all of the workforce. And there's a number of different platforms that we can use, and we're exploring in terms of ICT that not all of them, members of staff are all on ICT. So those blogs are, by their very nature, should be short. They could well be videos as well. So it's about disseminating it down in an easy format. So.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on point 1, subsection 2, just around the comms strategy, which is extremely welcome. Just a quick query within it, whether or not social media and channels of social media were being looked at within that. I did just have a quick look, and I think the social media policy hasn't been updated since 2017. And social media has definitely moved on a long way since 2017. There's probably about 18 different ways that young people are now communicating that no one had even thought of in 2017. So just to kind of make sure that whatever we're doing is relevant to the era that we're operating in, but then at the other end of the scale, just to ensure that whatever we're doing in terms of comms strategy also recognises people who aren't digitally connected. So on the one hand, you know, we need to make sure that we stay relevant, but on the other hand, we need to make sure that we are not excluding people who don't have access to those technologies, which is a significant portion of the community. But just would be really good to see that kind of considered as part of that comms strategy work. Thank you.
Okay.
I can concur that channels are definitely part of the comms strategy. So yeah, they'll be updated to make sure they reflect where we are today and maybe where we're heading.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Point 1.6, refresh how we share information to better equip officers with information they need to consider all workforce, including those without access to ICT. When you say without access to ICT, is that without access to council provided ICT? Okay. Is there a sort of policy for those individuals? I would propose that the vast majority of them would have a smartphone, that they're able to access those type of comms via their own device.
We've got no obligation for them to receive workforce information via their own personal device. Should they wish to receive it, they can lodge it, but we can't say you must receive it via your personal device.
There is an actual process that if I wanted to, but
Yes.
you haven't given me a laptop or a desktop or a
Yes.
smartphone.
But we have to be careful in terms of the information that's actually shared. Policy information is obviously fine, but we wouldn't obviously share any personal information, or we wouldn't share anything that's commercially sensitive on a personal phone. So.
Okay, I'll take this up with IT.
Councillor Rae's got a supplementary, and then I'll bring Councillor Douglas in. Councillor Rae.
It was just a question. Most people, are we switching to digital payslips, etc.? And not everybody will receive payslips, but the vast majority of people will receive payslips. So there is an opportunity through that to actually get to those people who don't necessarily have it. So if you're mailing them a payslip, that can include the COO newsletter or whatever, or if it's a digital one, it can be attached to the payslip. That's just an example of where people will be signing. I'm assuming everyone signs up to receive their payslip. So
Okay. Yeah, Helen?
There's another channel as well that we do actually use, the CYC Facebook page. So where it's not confidential information, again, we will actually put out, don't forget to speak to your manager about X, Y, and Z policy. One of the examples may well be the customer relations policy. That would be a good example that we send out. We also send information out about wellbeing and access to wellbeing on the CYC Facebook page. And we do actually get a number of manual workers who don't actually have CYC devices and don't need CYC devices that actually correspond through there, and we then pick up, and they pick up on a direct message.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, I'm just on this subject over the years, become aware of some of the employees that don't regularly access digital communications, and so I'm not saying by any means all, but there certainly are some people amongst our cleaning staff who particularly don't do that. And I've noticed when you go past the area at the bottom of the stairs there, that they're actually printing off some of the bulletins, for example, which is the accessible way for those people to still see them. So I think that range of access to communications is still really important within our staff, as it is in the general community out there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yeah. Can I ask some questions on section 2, on points 3 and 4? I wondered what was envisaged under this work with partner task and finish working groups. If you could perhaps illustrate what we're talking about here. And in 4, there's a reference to the York narrative. And I just wondered what that was. Is that a specific document? Or...
So,
To
give an example of partner task and finish and working groups, we've got an economic partnership group that meets regularly, and we've got part of that, a sort of subset of it, is the city centre spatial plan working group that's looking at how they can work together to set out what a refreshed city centre might look like prior to obviously engaging executives. So it's part of the kind of engagement and consultation with city partners who use and are kind of around the city centre. They're just examples of 2 working groups, or a working group and a task and finish group. In terms of the York narrative, that was approved, but I'm going to get the dates wrong, but that was approved by executive in December 2019. It followed a extensive citywide consultation. There's around about 7,000 people that took part in that consultation, and it led to essentially a story about who York is based on a set of city values that at the time was really well received by around about 28 different city partners who are part of the steering group and have since taken it forward. So you'll see the street art trail by York Bid reflects some of the city narrative. The university have used some of the city narrative in their 10-year strategy, the for public good city strategy. So it's really about how we can, as a council, draw on that city narrative and the city values that it talks about. Just to let you know, Councillor Merritt, and remind others, the values were making history every day, prioritising people, and pioneering with purpose. And the local transport strategy and the movement and place plan, which is coming to executive in next week, I think, maybe, or the week after, 18th of July, absolutely draws on those values, and you'll see them reflected in the way that it shapes out how to look at transport strategy differently.
Yeah, Councillor Merritt.
Sorry.
When it refers to city developments, that's more in the sense of developments that are occurring in the city than planning development. Right.
That's
okay,
right, yes.
I mean, just picking up on that, action 2, detail 3, in terms of groups that oversees and steers regeneration projects. I know the struggles that sometimes we've had as a committee to secure officer time to bring updates on major projects to this committee. So I saw that and thought, oh, well, That's nice. Can we have some input into overseeing and oversight is our role. So it slightly set alarm bells ringing in terms of all of this. I'm sure good work being done by good people, but it just as an aside, really, not to lose the oversight that this committee and other committees within the organisation do and should provide. But I'm sure that is a given. I'll take that as a given.
It is a given, but I can add something to make sure it's clear in the action, so we don't.
Yeah, it's just understanding the remit and where that ends and
where you begin. Yeah.
Public accountability begins. But that's good. Councillor Healy.
Question. So on the same point, is there a robust mechanism in place so that when the partner task and finish working groups are steering the regeneration projects, that they don't have any interest? I'm thinking primarily financial interests in those regeneration projects.
Yeah, it's still declaration of interests and things like that are still part of the membership, because you're absolutely right. You wouldn't have a group of developers sitting on a project that's talking about developing the city centre, because obviously that wouldn't necessarily provide the right oversight. Just to give you another example of a working group, we've got the York Central Strategic Partnership. So in the sense of the York Central Strategic Partnership, we are a member of that group. We are not a lead, we're not the lead of that group. That's led by Homes England and Network Rail. But then the City Developments Group will be able to take back feedback from the York Central Group and feed it into the council so that any of the opportunities aren't lost or the issues resolved.
Okay. Looking for any other comments from members on objective 3? Nope. Okay, let's move on to objective 4 on page 23. Build a strong foundation. Who has any comments on this section? Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the first point, what is meant by a 6-month snapshot?
So we've already got a 6-month snapshot and you're welcome to have a look at it. It's on the website. It's essentially an overview of the actions that have been delivered in correspondence to the council plan. So that as we go through the next sort of 3 years, every 6 months, residents and partners will be able to see progress, and it'll be brought together in a kind of digestible format, really signposting press releases or decisions so that you can see, so that residents can see actual action that's happened. And it's a bit more accessible, I suppose, than the performance monitor, which, as you know, is quite detailed.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, yes, that is quite detailed. In section 2, there's reference to scrutinising poor performing services and the Core Services Performance Board. It's really understanding how that will result in an improvement to services that residents can see and understand what's been done to correct what they've been rather unhappy about.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you mean visibility of the decisions that come out of the Core Services Improvement Board?
Yes.
I'll need to take that back and we'll have to consider that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Just a quick note really on section 4, which is all the scrutiny oversight, and you and I obviously spent a lot of time when I was in your position talking about the way that scrutiny works and you know, the role that it can play in shaping policy going forward in particular. But just on section 1 of that subsection 1, which is talking about the development of the member induction programme. if that wording can just be tweaked to make sure that it's very clear that there needs to be an ongoing programme of member training and development, because I think we'd probably all recognise you get elected, you get a big load of information thrown at you, and then you're on your way for 4 years, and actually you need to be continually refreshed on things. And certainly it's something that we talked about a lot within this committee, you know, was how scrutiny particularly could be used to its best, you know, fullest potential. And I think that that's by the engagement with members on an ongoing programme.
Thank you. I think just on that point, I was perhaps expecting something a bit more under item 4, in terms of the LGA report talked about a review of scrutiny arrangements. So I was perhaps expecting an action along the lines of review scrutiny arrangements. This talks about working with chairs to identify the process through which annual work plans are agreed. It talks about reviewing the scrutiny officer's role. We don't have dedicated scrutiny officers at the moment, so I was struggling to understand what this would result in terms of a review of the scrutiny function. I know we've said we will have a separate discussion on that item at this committee in the coming months. But I suppose my request would be for one of actions 1 to 5, detail 1 to 5, if the intention is to have a review of the way scrutiny functions, to actually say that, because at the moment it doesn't say that. If that's not the intention, then there's potentially a bit of a gap between what the LGA recommended and what we're planning to do, and we can discuss that. But I just wanted to understand if what the intention was.
Apologies, Chair. I'm sorry, not on named officer for this section, so I'll need to take that back. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. It'd be helpful to have clarity. So I think I suppose I don't want to come back and say, oh, we're discussing the future scrutiny now. So I know you're not, because it wasn't in the action plan. So we're not talking about it. I don't think that's the intention, but if you can liaise with the lead for that section, just look at the wording, that'd be helpful. Okay, Councillor Healy.
Super quickie. I'm not expecting you to be able to answer this. Could we put something in the minutes just asking for an update on how the cross-party constitution working group's actually going? Because it seems to have gone very quiet, and also when they're expected to be finished.
Probably a question for A&G, but if there's anyone here who would like to give an update, Councillor Melly.
I'm on that working group, and my understanding is that it's an ongoing process. The constitution is always going to need updates and reviews, and it's never going to be a completely finished, finalised document. We have discussed a lot and agreed a lot and had a lot of meetings. We haven't had any for the last few weeks because of the general election, because it's the same officers involved with running the election and running the constitution working groups. That's why it's been quiet recently. That we have been working on a lot before that, and yeah, my understanding is that it's a forever process.
Okay.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, just to add, the output of that is coming to A&G this week. We've got a constitution working group on Thursday this week. And the item on here says continue to work with a cross-party representative group to review the constitution ongoing. So I don't think it's a painting the whichever bridge system. You'll never get to the end of the constitution and go, right, constitution done. It will always need continued validation. I think that's my understanding.
Yeah. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I think on that particular issue, they would benefit from clarity on what that constitutional working group is, because I don't think everybody on the group thinks it's the same thing. So the discussions that were had very early on, where it was a light touch group to discuss areas where there was commonality. That's how it worked last time we did the constitutional review. Group of members got together to find where there was agreement with everybody, sort of speed things along, and then anything that was not agreed by everybody around the table would go to A&G, and that was the format for that. And I think the remit of that has started to wander and drift, and not everybody's 100% clear what their role is on that group and what that group's role is. Certainly our understanding.
Well, that might be something that those people who are at A&G tomorrow, that might be something worth discussing and clarifying, so everyone's on the same page with that. Okay, that brings us to the end of the discussion on the 4 objectives. In terms of, are there any other comments anyone wishes to raise on the draft plan? The one thing I was going to mention, looking at the LGA report, one of the recommendations talked about looking at structures to enable all members to undertake their roles, including early access to papers and expanded access to information. That was recommendation 11 in the LGA report. There's some mentions in the plan around improvements to induction arrangements, but nothing explicitly around the roles of members and looking at how we organise ourselves to enable members to be as effective as they can. So that was just one request from me, that looking at recommendation 11 in the LGA review, we look at whether and how that can be incorporated into this action plan. Unless it sits better somewhere else, I don't know.
I'll take that back to the Director of Governance. That's his section, so I'll ask him that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre?
I think it was just a general point, if it's trying to be, I mean, obviously HR and that particular part of the department will lead heavily on this, but there does seem to be throughout this a lack of input from, or apparent lack of input from the people directorates. So it was a small thing, as public speaker mentioned, there was a small number of officers accountable for pretty much all of this. And you don't want it to feel like the 2 departments that represent 60 to 70% of our entire spend are having things done to them by a particularly small group of people. I would hope that they're fully integrated in it. And I think that could have somehow been reflected better. So neither of those 2 directors are accountable for anything in this particular action plan. So just to make sure that we are working corporately, because the whole idea of this is to stop that silo thinking and make sure that all departments are working together. And it just doesn't, I'm not saying it's not happening as part of this action plan, but the way it's presented and looks, it does seem as though those have been excluded from any involvement in it.
Councillor Crawshaw?
Thanks, Chair. These were just questions on Annex B. Are we into that sort of talking about all of it?
So more general observations on what we've just discussed.
Oh,
that weren't
in which case
picked up on.
I just got a couple of points of clarity for.
Yeah, no,
I'll hold fire.
I'll come straight back to that. Councillor Rose, was yours?
It was a generalised point. Yeah. I guess picking up two separate things. The first thing I mentioned at the beginning about, and it's been raised a couple of times, about the status is not being up to date. It might just be me, but I'm not certain where this is going for regular updates and how we keep track of that status as a council, which committee it should be going to. So it'd be good to know what that looks like. And picking up on the public participation comment, I know that the LGA output is coming to A&G this month, 31st of July, I think. And you mentioned September as well for another aspect. I don't know if this is coming to that, but just be good to get clarity over what that looks like going forward.
So the governance around the actual corporate improvement action plan is it will be updated. We'll make recommendations to the leader for her decision on 17th of July. We'll then monitor its progress through the corporate improvement board, making sure actions are delivered, that the colour coding is correct. It will then be presented, I guess, to the Local Government Association for their review in December, and that report is published. Not sure when, December, January, and then it will be published to executive or presented to executive in May for their consideration. But remember, it's a live document, so you've got a point around what happens then. So it's a live document. It'll be refreshed continually. It gives us a 12-month set of actions to deliver in consultation with the rest of the directorates. But you might want to consider it coming back here at some point, maybe.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, Claire, you say the LGA report will be December, January, but won't come to the executive until May. Is there any reason why such a large gap?
Just the 12 months. So it's the 12 months since the corporate improvement framework was published to executive in May, like this year.
Yeah.
And it's a 12-month action plan. So yeah, but I mean, if you want it earlier, we can.
Well, it just seems that wasn't obviously expecting the response to that document to be immediate, leaving it for quite as long as that doesn't seem quite the right response to it. So, perhaps it should come with an update of some form or other.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Waller, then Councillor Rose.
Thank you. Just to pick up on general points from the actual peer challenge document. There doesn't seem to be much in the framework that's been presented in Annex A, which counters concerns about silo working. Obviously, if you're going to have everyone in boards together, I'm going to tackle that. But I think in terms of addressing the points that were raised in that challenge, there are some things that are not in this section. And also the links with organisational and place leadership, developing relations with local communities. There's been a lot in terms of partners, but in terms of demonstrating that there isn't a wall between West offices and the city, I don't really see that coming through in the section there.
Let us take that back, Councillor Waller, and digest that, to be honest, because reflecting on your silos, I think it's the language we're using. There isn't silos. Everyone is bought into this in terms of the corporate management team, the corporate governance team. We've got all of those layers and all of those individuals are actually involved with this. Picking up what Councillor Eyre said there earlier, we have got all the right people. He mentioned there about children and adults, corporate directors. They are part and parcel of that. I think we just need to strengthen the language around it. So we'll do that. But there is not working in silos. On the city side, the wall between West offices and the city, I can't comment on. But yeah, in terms of the silo working between all the directorates, that isn't there. But we obviously need to strengthen the language if you think that that's the case.
I think maybe we spoke earlier about the sections around developing a sense of residents understanding their roles and responsibilities as well as officers. That might be something you might be able to use that to tease out a bit more around that sense of a sort of two-way information flow and a shared understanding, which may be what was behind that, but maybe it needs to be drawn out a bit more. Councillor Rose, that's no. Councillor Healy.
Supplemental. Would it be useful on your main table to reference the peer review recommendation that it addresses? And would it be useful to add a table that said, well, the LGA recommendations were 1 to 14. 1 is addressed by, I don't know, objective 4.1.2, objective 2, 1.2. So something that basically links these two documents together. So people can see the driver for this has been this, and that all the recommendations for change have been addressed by this plan. Because I couldn't do that at the moment, for instance, because it's you can't do it basically.
But yeah, I suppose it's yeah. If you could have, think presentationally whether you want to have a separate table that lists the LGA report recommendations and then cross refers to how they're picked up in the action plan. I'm just conscious of not making the table too busy and having too many different columns when it just becomes completely.
So the corporate improvement action, the corporate improvement framework, which led to the corporate improvement action plan, has that. Right. It has the recommendation number linked to the activity, and all of the activities are the ones that are action 1, refresh the corporate management team, co-design the leadership framework. But we haven't brought it together, so we probably need to make sure we publish that with the executive member decision, so you've got a clear line of sight. Yeah.
No, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Helen?
And just to add that this is kind of a council-wide corporate improvement framework, action plan, and it takes on board more than just the corporate recommendations, the corporate peer challenge. So not all of them would have a reference from the corporate peer challenge. Yeah.
Councillor Merritt.
again, it was picking up on one of your comments. And Andrew's point about the wall. That's also very much an issue about attitudes, isn't it? And you know, how open staff feel able to be, or whether they feel they've got to be, you know, excessively guarded in how they relate to outside organisations and people. And I'm hoping, and I've been assuming that is what is going to be picked up in the vision, both in the vision, but in the training on trying to find the right paragraph. It was earlier in the document about what we expect of staff in terms of their approach. Sorry, leadership behaviours, values, and actions.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, but it might be useful to have a you know, how are you actually going to assess whether it's worked and is working? What's the monitoring on that going to be?
Again, that'll be coming through a number of different areas. In terms of behaviours, it should be picked up as part of, well, the chief operating officer should be able to identify that through the corporate improvement framework as it goes through the corporate governance board, through CMT reports, etc. So it's about the progress as a whole, monitoring this action plan that will be there. But it'll also come up in terms of behaviours, comes out in exit surveys, it comes from members of staff, it comes out from employee surveys. There's a whole range of different metrics that we can actually look at to assess that. And if there is individuals that we need to address, we obviously address it accordingly.
It's perhaps something you ought to pick up through the partnership arrangements, almost in a sort of you know, 360-degree feedback type approach. You know, do our partners, stakeholders, and so on feel that the officers that they're dealing with are being open and helpful and you know, wanting to cooperate and the rest of it. You know, I think it's extremely important to this council achieving its objectives when we are really constrained for resources, that happens. And the acid test is whether our partners and other people think that is what is happening.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Okay, if we can move on to Annex B, the Qualities Impact Assessment, and ask members if they have any comments on this. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a few points. Some I think are just bits of language and things just to pick up. And then a couple of questions. So page 35, I'm going to sort of go backwards if that's okay. 5.1, just to reiterate the point, the fourth bullet point down around embedding trauma-informed practice. And again, it's just that language about it being officers supporting residents and just trying to be a little bit more holistic about that, if we can. The page 32 on the impact on human rights, there's not actually any reference to which articles we're talking about. And so I think, you know, as a point of exercise, it's quite helpful sometimes to go, you know, this is Article 2, Article 5, because then you can sort of understand how those different points interact with each other. And I think that'll just sharpen that up a little bit, really. Under 4.1 on page 31 around disability, really good to see that reference to social model of disability and thinking about how we more deeply embed that. But I'm not sure whether there needs to be reference to public sector equality duty within there as well, because that's the legislative aspect of that. And I, you know, on a personal level, I don't think we fully understand that as an organisation yet in terms of how that should relate to all of the other obligations that we have. And then sort of up near the top, 1.4 and 1.3, these are sort of the same point in a way. So you've got who are the stakeholders and what are their interests in 1.3. We've then got a list of some of the stakeholders, nothing about what their interests are. So it's left to us to assume that we know what their interests are. And it links, if this is read as a sentence, it's fine, but it says residents and partners on one line. And I think the residents and the partners, in the way that it's then referred to throughout this document and Annex A, they're two very distinct groups who have a very distinct set of interests. So again, on 1.4, where it says that residents will experience a better service, should it read residents and partners will experience a better service? So it's just being clear about who we're talking about when.
Thank you for that feedback. Is this also on Annex B, Councillor Healy?
Yes.
Okay.
The only one of your step 4 analysing the impacts or effects that is high is the low income groups. The Poverty Truth Commission have told the council the negative effect of current behaviours on their experience of the council. Could you just expand on current behaviours? Because I don't know what they are.
So expand on what, sorry?
Expand on what are the current behaviours that are causing a negative impact that's on their experience of the council.
As a commissioner, would you thank you, Councillor
Yeah,
Douglas.
so I've been a civic commissioner for the past year on the Poverty Truth Commission, and between the community commissioners and civic commissioners, there's been an ongoing discussion about what action can be taken to the main action that can be taken to improve people's experience of services across the city, not just the council. Those people who are living in poverty who are experiencing now or have done. And it was around communication and being treated with respect and dignity in those communications, no matter what it was about. And there has been feedback about all services across the city, including the council, that everybody needs to be on board with treating everybody with respect and dignity. And as an outcome of the Poverty Truth Commission, the council has signed up to the charter that outlines actions to be taken around this. So that's what that's referring to.
That's been picked up in other parts of this document, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Councillor Orrell, question on Annex B?
Yeah, at the end of Annex B, there's the results of the consultation. I can't see anywhere how many respondents there were.
We can add that in, that's in the, oh, I thought there was. It's around about 200, so we'll make sure that the number's added to the final report.
Thank you.
The consultation on the framework.
Yeah.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just finally on page 32 related to Veterans Armed Forces community. I understand that the council is a member of the Armed Forces Covenant, and whether that could be included as an involvement there is sort of a positive thing that we do, and whether there's any feedback on. I'm not sure what level of covenant. Are we bronze? No, gold. We are gold. Sorry. But whether there's anything further that could be identified about that as well for the veterans. Thank you.
Okay. Members have any other comments on this agenda item? Councillor Healy.
Super quickly again, as we've moved on to the corporate improvement framework results, what are you able to pull out of these responses, given the fact they seem to be remarkably consistent across all of the questions? I personally couldn't see how I could use this to inform any changes on the main issue of the document. If I was to ask an average member of the public, refresh the corporate management team, CNT, as a strategic heart with the organisation with greater visibility, they'd look at me and go, well, that seems sensible. And that I'd suggest is all the way through on all of these questions.
So the actual results included significant number of comments. So we used the comments to inform the action plan. Those comments, the whole analysis and the comments are published, will be published with the executive decision member report. So you can see the line of sight between what people said and what it led to. Generally, most of the comments were along the lines of, yes, but have you thought about, or actually, shouldn't you know what you're doing, just get on with it. So it's a kind of mix of constructive and maybe not so positive.
Right, are we done? Are we done with this agenda item, members? Yes. Okay, it's now 1 minute past 7, so as promised, we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you. Welcome back. So we continue with the agenda. We're now up to agenda item 5, which is a paper on HR policy agreement processes. So this is an information paper which comes on the back of a request from a former member of this committee in relation to one particular policy, which was the standby policy. And it was explained that this committee doesn't have a role in determining policies, but I felt it would be helpful for members to receive a report setting out how those policies and processes are agreed, and this helpfully sets that out. So I say it's for information, but if I can ask Helen to introduce it as briefly or as boastfully as you wish.
Thank you, Chair. You've set out a very good introduction there. Thank you very much. So policies within the workforce, obviously there is 2 elements. There is both the contractual elements and non-contractual. The majority of our policies, and this is usual for any organisation, policies themselves are non-contractual. But the big difference of having contractual and non-contractual is the difference between negotiation with trade unions and consultation with trade unions. And by the very nature of consultation and negotiation, they are the common language terms. So negotiation, obviously we can have various debates. If it's just consultation, we, as well as the head of paid service in a council, they would actually have the overriding. But because we have a very open relationship with our trade unions, we work very closely with them, we always keep them informed along the lines. And you can see at paragraphs 8 under contractual policies, and then it should have a page number there, a number there. So under contractual policies, you can see the work that we would do with the trade unions in terms of regular task and finish groups. We actually have a task and finish group in the schedule on a weekly basis with trade unions. I also meet with them on a fortnightly basis, and we have those discussions. When it comes to task and finish groups, they're very much involved with the workforce from their members' perspective, etc. And we'll consult on proposals, we'll bring managers in. So you made an example there of the standby policy. So the standby policy across the council is a very, very complex policy. It involves lots of, obviously, we've got a very wide-ranging workforce, and there is a number of different arrangements right across the board. And they need to take into account all the practical arrangements for the individuals and the corporate kind of process of paying, which obviously is usually a point of discussion. Where those go through the trade unions, where we've reached agreement, they go through what was called the CCNC group, which is the Corporate Consultative and Negotiation Committee, of which our recognised trade unions sit on. And that is reached where agreement can't be actually arranged. We either go back to the drawing board, or we can have the ability to look at different options. One of the legal options, and we've never actually invoked this, is a dismissal and re-engagement process. That is a perfectly legal thing that we could do within an employment law, as long as everything has actually gone all the way through. When you do say those words, you often think about the press of what's gone on with the likes of the Ferries case and things like that, where it was just, we're doing this, this is happening. That is not the normal course of a dismissal engagement. To make it a legal process, you would actually go through an awful lot of negotiations. Non-contractual policies, they tend to take exactly the same path, but just have going through our corporate management team, going through the trade unions, going through CCNC, and having task and finish groups. So I think this document really just sets out and gives you hopefully some assurance of the ways that we actually work with our trade unions. When we're often creating policies, we involve employees as well as managers to look at their experience. An example would actually be one we've been talking about today, when we've been looking at the managing difficult relationships with customers and things like that. We've pulled people in and said, tell us about your experiences. How has this worked? How has that worked? To be able to draw that up. And obviously we're going on to the next stage in terms of with customers as well. So, and that work did go through trade unions, as my colleague Claire actually mentioned. We worked together on making sure that that was there. And the unions provided some really good feedback, because they're obviously interested to make sure that our employees are protected in terms of when relationships can be strained with members of the public. So.
Thank you very much for that. I found it a really helpful paper, just setting out the landscape of policies and contractual, non-contractual, to better understand how that's all handled. So thank you for that. Do any members have any questions for Helen? This isn't a scrutiny topic in itself, more of an information paper, but a helpful one nonetheless. No, thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good night.
So we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the pipeline of projects for the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. So this was in the agenda supplement that was published towards the end of last week, which I was happy for this to come as a later paper, because it would have been physically impossible for it to be published with the other items, because it was still, the draft pipeline was still on its journey through all of the other scrutiny committees. By way of a reminder, we discussed the draft list of pipeline projects around a month ago and provided detailed feedback. Other scrutiny committees have done the same. So what we're being presented with today is the culmination of that work. I suggest we don't need to replay discussions we've had either at this committee or previous committees. It's really an opportunity for Claire and Sam to provide any sort of further feedback on the discussions that have been had. And there's a last opportunity for members to flag anything up that they vehemently disagree with, that other committees may have fed back, or to make any further comments that perhaps they didn't make when we first discussed it. So I can ask Claire and Sam to add anything they wish before we open it up to members.
Thank you, Chair. So Claire Fole again from Assistant Director of Policy and Strategy. So we've brought the pipeline to you, the draft pipeline. It summarises all of the scrutiny feedback which we've had from previous meetings, which has been added to the pipeline and colour coded. Colour coding is at the top of the pipeline, so you can see which comments relate to which scrutiny committee, noting that some members are at multiple scrutiny committees. The pipeline are those projects the council officers and all the scrutiny members feel most important for mayoral consideration for a future funding discussions. It will help provide a steer for officers on the projects to focus on that most meet ambitions set out in the council plan, the 10-year strategies, and mapped to the emerging regional framework. The regional framework itself is going to the Combined Authority Committee towards the end of July. So it's emerging at this stage, and obviously it'll be approved later on. In Annex A, through the colour coding, you can see the 19 different proposals which have had suggestions from scrutiny committee members, together with a couple of new ideas also suggested by scrutiny members. By approaching each scrutiny and inviting them for their comments, we believe the process has robustly considered all groups' views for leader consideration and to steer officers' future work with the mayoral combined authority. This, of course, does not prevent partners developing their own pipeline or their own discussions with the mayor, nor does it prevent us responding to future opportunities. At this stage, we believe that following leader approval in the next couple of weeks, we will be back to scrutiny in 12 months with a revised pipeline, updating on progress and sharing new opportunities. But we might, however, have to amend that approach based on the new administration's pace, which is we don't yet know, because obviously they've only just been elected. Sam will update you on feedback from the scrutinies and just provide you with an overview. I just wanted to pick up on a comment from, I think, Councillor Healy around funding earlier on in the session. Yeah. we've deliberately not included funding or proposed funding against the pipeline. At this stage, we're only interested in priorities, simply because it's not a case of this is going to cost this much or this is going to cost that much. We want to keep it really open so that actually it's what's important for us as a city and us as an officer cohort to focus on, rather than how much it costs. And the cost negotiation will come once we understand whether it's a priority to you or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will invite any additional comments from members on the amended pipeline. Anything you want to add into the mix, or anything you disagree with that has been added since we last had the discussion? Councillor Crawshaw.
Just a quick point of clarity, just so we're all clear on what this document is. I think if I've understood correctly, this is essentially a gathering together of all of the comments that have been made at all various different scrutiny committees, potentially by individual members as well as by committees as a whole, to have then as much feedback as possible for leader to ultimately decide the prioritisation on. So what goes forward in this document isn't necessarily this is all set in stone. This is just a series of ideas or suggestions.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you.
So I forgot to ask Sam if there's anything you wanted to add.
Oh no, it was just to reference, I think, what Claire's already said. The feedback from all the different scrutiny committees is running up in a kind of a rolling stock take over the course of the last month or so. It's been really interesting to go to different scrutiny committees to hear the views of different members as well. I think if you look at the pipeline itself as it currently exists, the main feedback was predominantly around the well-connected economy section of the document. But also I think it explores, I think it's reflective of the different committees as well, a desire to see culture and society referenced in the document as much as economy in terms of the development pipeline. So as the emerging framework comes into being from the mayoral side, we can look to reflect that as well in the pipeline moving forward. So it's kind of very much a stock take of where we are with the scrutiny committees at this point in time.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the original version was really good, and the maturing and the additions look good as well. So there's nothing substantial missing. I've got 3 things that I think can be slightly broadened from what we've got here to make sure we're bringing everything to the table that we can. On page 9, transport connectivity, public transport enhancements, it says York's villages. I'd suggest change that to villages around York, which implies not just York Council area, but implies the ones that are part of our community, but aren't within our borders. On the same page, it references late night park and ride for Poppleton Bar. I think it probably should include the other park and ride services. The last bus from the cinemas, 10 p.m. on 6 nights of the week, and 7 p.m. on the other day. The last bus back from the Minsters before 7 p.m. on a Sunday, for example, stuff like that would be useful to just broaden to say park and ride late night in general. And then the last one on page 10, it says West and York and North and East Yorkshire tourism and cultural offer. Can we say Yorkshire tourism and culture, or even York and North Yorkshire and neighbours to include Teesside, whatever? Might just be worth broadening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, just on the issue of broadening, given that this is potentially a regional document, the reference to EV charging, I think is a bit York specific. The reality is there will probably be similar issues in parts of Scarborough, Harrogate, in terraced areas. So I think we could perhaps generalise that one to make, it is a genuinely regional priority. I think some of the earlier comments, Johnny's and Claire's, were quite important. This is a hell of a list. There's not really been any detailed evaluation of individual ideas and so on. And frankly, when a more detailed evaluation is, some of these may not be appropriate and so on. So I think we do need to see the document in that sense. It's as much a list of ideas as it is, I think, I don't think we should see it as necessarily more than that, because we haven't really had a detailed policy debate on individual items and the rest of it.
Yeah, Thank you. The only comments I was going to make was around the reference to, I think referencing an individual park and ride site, probably it can be broadened. Similarly, disabled parking outside some individually named locations, it could probably broadened into suitable accessible parking at destinations and other leisure facilities. And the explicit reference of repairing Skeldergate Bridge. I know it did come up in discussion at a previous scrutiny, but it can, again, maybe broadened into ensuring that key infrastructure, key transport routes are fit for purpose. I don't know how you would describe it. Otherwise, it goes from very high level to very, very low level. I suppose just how we describe it, just so it flows better as a sort of a document. But I appreciate you're just taking on board the feedback, the very specific feedback that came back from those meetings, but could probably sort of described in a different way. Councillor Melly.
This might be a really basic question, but what exactly are York ambitions? Because I'm aware of what kind of strategies we have, and I'm aware of what priorities we have in our plans, and I'm aware of our each principles, but I'm not really familiar with what an ambition is. Is it all of those together?
Yeah, so in to the latter part of December 2022, the 10-year strategies were brought together with city partners who set out a series of 5 ambitions which are reflected in the 10-year strategies, the skills strategy and the emerging transport strategy. So one of them would be, for example, net zero by 2030. One of them is around being reducing health inequalities. I'm going to forget now what the rest of them are, but one of them is about skills for all ages, a series of kind of broad ambitious statements against each of those kind of different areas. I think we spoke at the last meeting, the last scrutiny committee, that we'll need to bring the 10-year strategy framework back for discussion with this scrutiny group, because it doesn't focus sufficiently on anti-poverty or housing. So at the time of developing the 10-year strategy framework, it didn't have that focus, and to align with the new administration and the new council plan, we need to make sure it's more broader and it covers those two elements. But we have a set of 5 ambitions covering health, skills, transport, economy and sustainability climate.
So as a council, we have 5 ambitions, 7 priorities and 4 each principles.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. In the column York ambition, it's not just those 5 ambitions that are listed, it references all sorts of strategies and everything. Should it also be referencing things like the priorities and the each principles and all of the different things that it matches to?
So,
or should the column be renamed if it's not just matching these, pipeline projects to an ambition, if it's also matching it to other things? Does the column need retitling, or
we just call it strategy? Yeah, we could just call it strategies. I mean, the strategies are about how you make that ambition alive, essentially, and how you deliver that ambition. But we could just call it the relevant strategy, because it's in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Taking on board your previous comment at the very, very beginning, I understand where we are now. We have this big list that's percolated through by various means. I understand where we're going to be in, I don't know, 3 months' time, 2 months' time, a month's time, where there's going to be a list in front of the combined authority, and they're going to go, okay, we're going to fund, 1, 2, 3. How are we going to get from here to there? And in particular, I'll come back to the costs. When are the costs going to start to drop in? And also on here, I'm not picking up through the document that there's many, like, in quote, shovel-ready projects. Now, my understanding is the council had some of these, quite big ones, so that when the government announces like an extra 5 million for ex-industrial food manufacturing towns in the north, we can pull down one of these, update it a bit to match one of these things, and we can send it off. I'm not picking that up here.
So I know we've got the kind of the quick win rows, which are the green ones. I mean, I suppose it speaks to Councillor Berry's point in terms of this isn't a prioritised list. It's a start for 10 in terms of trying to get something down on paper that, yeah, would then need sort of further work to fine tune, prioritise. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what Councillor Healy was asking.
Yeah, so this clears officers. This makes sure that officers stay on the page, focus on the things that are important to you as members. The priorities are set by the mayor. So the mayor might say, it's really important for me to focus on culture this month. And we'll go to our list of things that you've all said you want to focus on around culture, and we'll present them to the mayor and say, these are the things that are important to York in terms of culture. In terms of funding, the green ones are,
Finish. Yeah.
Sorry, the green ones, we're in negotiation with the mayor right now. So he's making an announcement in July and September around some of those schemes that have been funded. And of course, that will tell you how much he's going to give us, essentially. But when we come back in 12 months, if not earlier, we'll be able to give you a list of how much funding we've got against each of these projects, so you can see the kind of totem, if you like, the totem amount that has been funded via the mayor. I'm going to have to stop there because I can't remember the last.
Neither can you. What did you want to? What did you want to?
When you use the term mayor, are you actually meaning the combined authority?
No, I'm meaning the mayor and the joint committee. So the mayor, the combined authority is the mayor who sets the priorities, and then through the committee, which is I'm not sure if committee is the right word.
The combined authority.
Committee, which is representative of our leader and deputy leader and North Yorkshire's leader and deputy leader. They vote on the things that will be delivered to meet the mayoral priorities.
Okay, because it's my understanding the mayor had quite a small budget that he decided. The big bulk of the budget is the combined authority budget, of which he is one vote out of 3, and they all have to agree. Is that, am I not right on that?
I'm not sure we need to get into it, or want to get into a discussion about the mayoral budget, the combined authority budget, and the processes through which that is decided. That's not what we're here to talk about. We have talked about it before, but some time ago, so you forgive me for. So focusing on the pipeline, are there any further comments that Councillor Crawshaw?
Yeah, just a tiny point. On page 7, right down second from bottom, decarbonising and adapting new and existing infrastructure E. And it says funding to retrofit heritage buildings. And I think that's a reflection of a discussion that we had here last time around. But I wonder if it's possible to expand that to heritage and cultural buildings, because I think actually we were talking about things like the Yorkshire Museum and the Theatre Royal, which probably actually would both count as heritage buildings, but the principle and the concept is around the broader thing. And that would then enable reference within the York ambition to something of the cultural strategy as well.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the pipeline? Councillor Rose.
Yeah, there's one thing that I forgot on the previous. It is very tiny. On page 7, it mentions Tanghall, Fishergate, the Groves, etc. It doesn't mention any suburbs or villages. It'd be good to throw in a village and to make sure those smaller centre plans are not just city centre plans, just to remove ambiguity. But I also wondered, it references community neighbourhood plans, whether actually, off the back of what was said earlier, the York ambition column should include those community neighbourhood plans as a York ambition, even though it's not the totality of York, if that makes sense. It would be a good way of including those, I think, on this doc.
Yes, we don't want to inadvertently exclude places we don't mean to exclude. Yeah. Just checking. Any other comments? Councillor Claire. Claire.
Yeah, it's a long night. Just to remind you all, where we are sitting today, we're proposing to come back in 12 months with a progress review on what we've done against this pipeline and what next. Depending on the pace of change with any Office of Budget Responsibility and emergency budgets and all those sorts of things that might be announced over the next couple of months, we might suggest we come back earlier just to hold that thought.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crawshaw.
Just on that last point, presumably whilst this is a document that is focused on going to the combined authority to look for funding essentially, some of the stuff that's contained within this presumably will also inform if there are announcements from central government about different things. It gives us a guide on that as well.
Yeah, it's the pipeline, but we're saying it's the mayoral combined pipeline because that's currently where we know the money is, yeah.
Okay, if there are enough further comments, thank you to Claire and to Sam for your work trooping around all the scrutiny committees and giving us an opportunity to feedback. It's been appreciated and hopefully it's been of some use.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 7, work plan, as presented in the agenda. Our agenda for September is looking fairly brief. Well, one agenda item, but it may prompt a 2-hour-long discussion. We shall see. Okay. Which we can pick up at our next work planning meeting. Just to say the Acomb Front Street item will be a pre-decision scrutiny discussion. There's an executive member decision session on the 24th of September at which a decision will be made. Ordinarily this item would go to the economy in place, but that is also a meeting on the 24th September. So that didn't work, which is why it's coming to this committee on the 9th September in order to be able to have that pre-decision scrutiny. There were a couple of other items we were hoping to take at the September meeting, but for various reasons that proved impossible, but we shall continue to work to try and have as a balanced set of agendas as possible. Otherwise, October, November, December could be fairly busy, and I'm conscious that we haven't got a September meeting, Q1 monitor or the 23-24 outturn. It looks like we're going to have to take both of those in October, which isn't ideal, particularly as it would be so long since the end of the financial year. But we shall do our best. So if there are items we can move forward from later agendas to discuss in September, then we'll try and do that, just to try and ensure we have agendas that are relatively equally balanced rather than horrifically long meetings. But yeah, the Vice Chair and I will pick up outside the meeting what else we can potentially add to the September agenda. And I think for the next work plan for the September item, if we can include our forward plan of CSMC, sketch out the likely shape of the agendas going forward for the rest of the municipal year, just so the committee's got visibility of that. Okay, Councillor Healy.
If I would like to suggest an agenda item that isn't a working group, is now the time to do it?
By all means.
Yep. The Investors Aid Fund, which is sat at 4 million, I think it might be a quite good idea just for us to have a look into its workings and efficacy. It's just that the annual accounts have just come out, and over the last 2 years, it's pretty much sat at 4 million. Now, I'd imagine there's been drawdowns and paybacks, etc. I'm just surprised at a time of such change that it's not being drawn down more.
So I suppose trying to think of when we have the Chief Finance Officer due to come, it would make sense if we did want her to give an update on that as part of a...
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, just in terms of making best use of officer time. So
maybe October.
I'll ask the question and
yeah, thank you.
Any other comments on the work plan? No? Thank you for that. There's no urgent business, so declare the meeting closed. Good night.